Hey everyone, I'm Ian Douglas, the author of the website techinterview.guide. I do live streams every Sunday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern about topics relevant to interview preparation for the tech industry. I occasionally record longer Q&A sessions, and I've started to break those into smaller videos to post. And there'll be information at the end of this video about how to get in contact with me if you have additional questions. Let's get to it. How do you get the feel of the interviewer before you actually go to the interview to know if they will possibly let you down? I thought the wording of this question was a little bit interesting. I don't know so much that the interviewer themselves are going to let you down. I have kind of my own questions about this question of why do you think the interviewer themselves is going to let you down? Is there some sort of story you're telling yourself in your mind that when you go to that interview, it's just going to not work out well? Because sometimes walking in with that energy or walking in with that mindset, you're going to cause problems, sort of subconsciously. And so I always tell people, like, get a good night's sleep the night before, eat a good breakfast or a good kind of meal to start your day. Take time for you, do some deep breathing kinds of exercises. But if you're wondering, like, how do I research something about the interviewer themselves so that I'm kind of better prepared? By all means. I mean, Lee and I talked about that a couple of weeks back on the stream, and we talked about it on a couple of other streams. You got to be prepared when you walk into these interviews. You can't just walk in and wing it and ad-lib things and hope you're going to get by. You have to prepare. You have to know what the company does. You have to research what they do, that kind of stuff. You have to be ready for that. And so how do you get the feel for the interviewer? I'm just going to take just the first part of that question. How do you get the feel of the interviewer before you go into the interview? And then the second part is like, how can you tell if they're going to possibly let you down? I'm curious if the wording of that means, if you're going to get rejected or something like that. But I think those are two separate things. So this first part, how do you actually research the interviewer? When the company contacts you and says, hey, we want to sit down and interview you, you should have some point of contact. You should have somebody at the company that is in charge of letting you know this is what the process is, this is who's going to be interviewing you. And if they don't share that information with you, ask them to share that information with you. You can totally ask, hey, can I find out, like, what's the interview process like? What should I study? What should I prepare for so that when I come, I can be ready and practice, certain types of problems or certain kinds of questions, or are there multiple interviews? And is this like going to be a behavioral interview? Is it going to be a technical interview? Is it a bit of both? You can totally ask them those questions. Some companies will absolutely tell you, like, ahead of time, all the different things and bits and pieces about their interview process. And I have a ton of respect for companies who are willing to share that kind of information up front. Not every company will, but a lot of companies will share that up front. They want to see you succeed. When you're at that point of the interview, they want to say yes. And so they don't want to, get through the interview and go, nah, that didn't work out. Let's just go on and interview a bunch of other people. It's expensive for them to do this. It takes a lot of time and it's an expensive process. So they want to see you succeed. And so I think more and more companies are willing to kind of make that sort of leap and say, yeah, we'll share a little bit more about our process with you kind of as we go. And so definitely reach out to your point of contact and say, can I find out about the interview, but can I also find out who's interviewing me? And then go do research on them. If you've already been networking with someone at the company, ask that person that you've been networking with about the people that you're interviewing with and say, hey, I found out I'm interviewing with Ian. What's Ian like at the company? Can you tell me a little bit about his role? Can you tell me a little bit about what they do? Do you have a LinkedIn contact that you can share? Can you make an introduction kind of thing? It's totally okay to do that. It's absolutely okay to do that. So you gotta research them. I usually tell people who are getting into the tech industry for the first time, especially if you're coming from what we call the non-traditional path, although it's becoming a more traditional path of like not getting the CS degree but still want to get into tech. So you get some other career, or you've never gone to college and then you go to like a boot camp or a code program of some kind, and now you're getting into the tech industry. I completely lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Oh, so you're coming from this non-traditional background, and how do you network and so on, and finding out about them. And if you find out that the person that's interviewing you has kind of that traditional background, then you can kind of gauge, okay, well, they're more likely to ask me CS types of questions. If they also don't have a CS background, they're less likely to ask you those kinds of questions. It doesn't mean that they won't, because they might be given questions or they might have gone through extra studying and things like that. But people who historically have a CS background, they're more likely to ask CS, computer science related questions, because that's their background. That's how they interviewed, that's how they're interviewing you. Some companies, though, do a really good job of training people to say, like, hey, the person you're about to interview doesn't have a CS background. They're not going to be able to answer certain kinds of questions, and that's okay. And so hopefully they're kind of on board with what's going on. They don't act all smug about it or something. But so anyway, so I just wanted to mention that. So you have to do research on the person. Find out what's their education, how long have they been at the company, what other kinds of companies have they been at, and then you can ask them personal questions like, you know, what brought you to this company? What keeps you at this company? What do you like about working here? Is there anything you don't like about working here? They may not answer that, but they might share a few things with you. And then the second part of this question was like, how can you find out all this information to know if they're possibly going to let you down? And again, I'm curious if the wording on this means if you're going to get rejected. But I think if you understand enough about them, you can build more of that collaborative conversation, which is what interviews should be. And I say this a lot on the stream. Interviews should be conversation, not interrogation. And so hopefully through researching that person and what they know and kind of their education background, you can find some kind of common ground with them to have just better conversation with them. And so it doesn't feel like I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to wait for you to ask me a question. I'm going to answer that question and then hope you ask me another question. The best kinds of interviews are where I ask you a question, you answer it, and then that makes you ask me a question, and then I get to answer that and then ask you a follow-up question. It's a great feeling for us as interviewers when it feels interactive, where it's not just a one-way, you know, I'm going to ask you a question, you give me an answer, and now I ask you another question, you give me another answer. And so any kind of research you can do on the person is going to help make that be a very collaborative kind of effort. Hey, thanks for watching. I love helping people out with interview prep, and I hope this video helped you in some way. If you found this Q&A useful, please consider subscribing. You can follow me on Twitch as well for the live stream twice a week. Check out techinterview.guide/streaming for more information. I also have a daily email series that you can subscribe to on the website. There are never any ads, and when you finish the series, I scrub your information out of my database permanently. Finally, if you have a question that you'd like answered on the stream, you can find my contact info on techinterview.guide. I prefer LinkedIn or email. If you leave your question in a YouTube comment, it might take me longer to find it, but I'll see you next time.